Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, the row over the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission continued to be in the spotlight. Today, the Commission Chairman, N.K. Singh, reiterated that the Finance Commission has nothing to do with setting the terms of reference. The government, meanwhile, maintains that the TOR is fair and equitable. Yesterday, the finance ministers from Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Puducherry met in Kerala to discuss their concerns on the 15th Finance Commission's terms of reference. Now, the terms of reference recommend that the 2011 census be used to calculate population for allocation of the union tax revenue instead of the 1971 census. The South Indian states feel that this would adversely impact their revenue collection because they have proactively implemented population control measures. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley defended the terms of reference in a Facebook post where he alleged that the southern finance ministers were creating a needless controversy, adding that nothing could be further from the truth. He wrote, and I quote, "The terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission rightly balance both the needs represented by the latest population and progress towards population control very well. There is no inherent bias or mandate in the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission, which can be construed as discriminatory against the states which made good progress in population control." End of quote. That is the statement coming in from the Finance Minister. And joining us now to take this conversation forward is the former Finance Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Haseeb Drabu. Also with us, Mr. Govinda, member of the 14th Finance Commission. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Mr. Drabu, let me start by asking you, you've seen the objections that have been raised by finance ministers of southern states. You've seen the response that's come in from the union finance minister saying that the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission are fair and equitable, and that the finance commissions have always looked at population as a proxy as well as income distance, which is relative poverty, in terms of allocation or distribution. Do you believe that there is merit in the argument being made by the southern states?
Frankly, no. I have issues with the terms of reference of the Finance Commission, but that really is about the design of those terms of reference and how a number of things that have happened have not been included. As regards the specific issue being raised by the southern states, I am not in agreement with that. Principally, the fact that 1971 should be used as a measure. Now, there are a variety of reasons for this. I mean, if you take 1971, even as you have 2011, you are really creating a mythical figure of population. Because if you look at the core understanding of the Finance Commissions as outlined in the Constitution, you need to provide public services or equalization of public services across population. And it is realistic to take 2011. There is an argument that it, in terms of population control, that it might adversely affect those states. But then please recognize that only 10% so far is based on population. And there are enough ways in which the 15th Finance Commission can work out a system whereby they compensate those states which have done better population control. I mean, there are a number of statistical measures that one can think of which would actually bring back the balance. But I strongly feel that, like the 14th Commission did, and quite correctly so, take the 2011 figures and not 1971.
Okay, well, the 14th Finance Commission took both 1971 as well as 2011, so you don't necessarily agree with the argument that's being presented by the southern state finance ministers, though you did say that you have other issues with the TOR. I'll come to that in just a bit, but let me go across to Mr. Govinda, member of the 14th Finance Commission. So the 14th Finance Commission had no specific mandate to use the 2011 census data, but you did. In fact, you allocated what was a 10% weightage to the 2011 population. Do you believe that there is justification to the argument that is being presented by southern states? And the finance minister's argument is that the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission also very specifically allow for the Finance Commission to propose specific incentives to reward states that have done well on population control. So is this much ado about nothing?
Let me first of all correct you factually. It is not correct to say that the southern states met only to discuss on the issue of population. In fact, there are several contentious issues in the terms of reference. And in fact, they had flagged 6 different contentious issues. And population issue is one of them because it concerns them. The issue of whether population is, let me also correct my good friend Haseeb Drabu, that population is not 10%. If you take both 70, in fact, the previous Finance Commission's listing, if you take both 71 and 2011 population, it becomes 27.5%. That is under 17.5 plus 10%. So the question is, so they are concerned about that. Now, whether there is a logic, I mean, there are a number of other issues, which is not the only issue. That is one of the things that I want to correct.
Sure.
In fact, you see,
sure.
Population is some people, if you use them 2011, some states gain, some states lose. And if you are talking about what should be the correct population to be used, I will say the current population, not even 2011 population. Because the objective of the Finance Commission transfers is to enable the states to provide comparable levels of services to comparable tax effort. When you say comparable levels of services to state means for the services for the current population and not 2011 or 1971 population. So, I mean, that issue, the issue, in other words, you see, everybody is barking the wrong tree. And even the people who make about,
let me then ask you, sir.
No, the question is, why did the term of reference, Shirin, please listen to me. Why did the term of reference have to say anything about population at all?
Okay, so you're questioning why the terms of reference had to specifically talk about population. Let me quote to you what the former finance minister is saying. The former finance minister P. Chidambaram says that the terms of reference are seriously flawed. Even Mr. Drabu seems to have objections with the terms of reference. You said that it's not just population.
I have serious objections. I have written on it on December 4th, 2017.
Yes. So what are your key objections, Mr. Govinda Rao, with the TOR?
Now, there are several objections that I have. Number one, never in the history of the never in the history of this country, a Finance Commission has been asked to review the recommendation made by the previous Finance Commission, and sort of make provision and ask the Commission to make provision for various schemes that they are going to come up for New India 2022. Which basically implies that I am going to create more and more centrally sponsored schemes. You reduce the tax devolution and then give me more money, number one. Number two, never in the history of the Finance Commissions has the terms of reference said, you may examine whether the revenue deficit grant should be given at all. Article 275 means for that. Third, there are, in para 7 of the terms of reference, there are a number of performance indicators have been given, and the Commission has been asked to take into account these indicators. The question is, these are all relating to the centrally sponsored schemes on state subjects, and I mean basically telling that, you see, I am doing, in fact there is even giving grants under Article 282 itself is questionable, and you give that grant, and constitutionally there are serious problems. Now, there are things like this. There are several things like this, basically saying that I am giving a charity to the states, and therefore, you have to take into account the performance that I suggest you. And then, there is something called populist schemes. You give 80,000 crores for your bank recapitalization. Whose mistake is it? I mean, are you not supposed to think in terms of that? You ask the state's tax effort to be taken into account. Your tax effort, why is it that the center's tax effort is not to be taken into account? There are series of flaws in this particular thing. This is, in fact, I will go use the very strong words to say that this is against the entire federal spirit, and central government through the presidential term seems to be thinking that they were giving a charity to the states.
That's a very strong statement that is coming in from a former Finance Commission member of the 14th Finance Commission, Mr. Govinda Rao. Mr. Drabu, I'd like you to react to that. There are several issues that Mr. Govinda Rao has pointed out, and he seems to be echoing what we've heard from the Kerala Finance Minister Thomas Isaac when he says that the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission will destroy the federal cooperative structure of the nation. Mr. Govinda Rao saying that this is against the federal spirit, it is constitutionally also a problem. Would you agree?
No, I would tend to agree with Govinda Rao. The issue really is that the kind of things he referred to, the populist schemes, the review of it, the terms of reference have serious value judgments been made. Like he said about the whole issue of reviewing the 14th commissions, that it says that the terms of reference do say that there has been a substantial hike. You see, the 14th commission tried to do something very interesting, and I think it was correct in doing so, raising the devolution and trying to reduce the expenditure underwriting by the centre. Now, the centre may not have been able to reduce expenditure underwriting, so it's trying to go back, and I think that's a flawed thing. But my principal objection to the terms of reference is that it doesn't adequately factor in the emergence of perhaps India's first genuinely federal institution, which is the GST Council. Now, it has implications on a number of ways in which things are done. For instance, the GST Council, right? You know, I remember Mr. Gohan once said that Finance Commission is a dog that barks at the center and bites the states. Now, the same cannot be said about GST Council, which is why I emphasize that GST Council is India's first genuinely federal institution. Now, nowhere, it seems to have been, while drafting the terms of reference, the GST Council, GST regime seems to have been thought of more as a tax collections system, rather than a fair amount of change in the entire fiscal federal setup, because states and centers have pooled their sovereignties. Now, it has implications, as I said, first, that why should there be a member from the Planning Commission or the Niti Aayog? Earlier, it was relevant because Planning Commission was doing the plan part and Finance Commission was doing a non-plan. Now that we have moved to Revenue and Capital, I see no role for the Niti Aayog to be there. Instead, somebody from the GST Council had been done, because what they will eventually devolve will be decided by the thing. Now, this has also serious implications, because unless the GST Council and the Finance Commission are on the same page, it can create a constitutional crisis. Because at the end of the day, if there is a hierarchy of institutions, GST Council with elected members from all states will be higher up. It's more a Brahmin in the hierarchy of institutions than the Finance Commission. So there is, that recognition has not been done. Second, I think the important point is that we have also moved from a production-based tax to a consumption tax. Now, this will have implications on emergence of deficits. How will that pan out? Are there, you know, the Finance Commission should have been given enough leeway to work out this in a different form. I think we need a second-generation Finance Commission, which would could handle the entire nature of change in the fiscal federal system post the emergence of GST and GST Council. I think that's where my principal objection stems from. And then, of course, there are these issues like populist schemes, revenues, and others, which do actually don't augur well for the system at all.
Okay, so you're in agreement there with Dr. Govinda Rao. Dr. Rao, let me end then by asking you, sir, so far the government has stated very categorically that there is no reason for them to amend the terms of reference. You and Mr. Drabu both have pointed out some serious flaws that you see with the manner in which the terms of reference have been framed. If the government were to go back to the drawing board, assuming that they were to take these objections on board, prioritize for us, what are the top 3 things that they need to amend?
Now, let me first react to what, Haseeb Drabu said. You know, I really do not think GST Council should be represented in the Commission for a very different reason. You know, number one, Constitution doesn't say, it doesn't lay down either the Planning Commission or the Niti Aayog or GST Council member. That's one. You know, more importantly, every member of the GST Council is a representative of a particular state or the union government. And there is a serious conflict of interest that will come in when you put a member of the state. You know, and therefore, you know, it would be better to have sort of independent experts rather than getting in another sort of member of another particular state. So there will be conflict of interest issue. That's one.
Okay.
Number two.
Okay.
Now, as far as the sort of finance minister's reaction is concerned, I mean, I really don't know why he reacted, first of all, because this is a presidential terms of reference. This is not the terms of reference of the finance ministry. Constitutionally, this is the president who has given the terms of reference, and I mean, finance ministry has no business to comment on that. That is more a political comment, and then I would like to ignore that particular comment. As far as
okay.
let me also let us put the Constitution at the central piece of things. More than anything else, when the 9th Finance Commission was then, in fact, the terms of reference said the commission shall adopt a normative approach, and there were serious objections raised by Mr. E.K. Nayanar, the then Chief Minister. And the chairman of the commission wrote to all the state chief ministers saying that, look, we have the right to use whatever, Article 280 subclause 4 allows me to use whatever approach and methodology that I want to use. And, you will consider various approaches, including the normative approach in dealing with that. But in doing that, we will do just, equitable and, sort of just and equitable and, sort of uniform, sort of approach to both union and states.
Okay.
This was the letter written by Mr. N.K.P. Salve, who was the chairman. Now, here... one possibility is that this, all the ministers, it's not just the southern states. On a common contentious issues, if they go and then represent to the president may cause it to be sent back to the finance ministry or ask for their comments and then make amendments. What amendments you have to make?
Okay.
I think this performance-related incentives that they are talking about, which basically is, I mean, this thing, they have to get rid of that to see whether, to examination of Article 275 grants should be given at all. There is one further issue, that is the Article 293.3, which basically says that, when the state governments borrow, I mean, if they are indebted to the center, they have to take the permission of the center to borrow. And in that, they said that, you please ask whether we can put conditions there, which means that conditions for borrowing, in fact, those will be, whether those conditions will be used in the tax devolution grants, which will be completely, inverting the Constitution. I mean, so there are lots of corrections, and it is a very badly drafted terms of reference.
Okay, very badly drafted terms of reference. That's the word in from Mr. Govinda Rao, saying that the terms of reference almost suggest that the centre is doing charity towards states, and of course objections being raised with the TOR there by the former finance minister of J&K, Haseeb Drabu. Dictating terms to the commission, which is not what he says is the constitutional validity. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here to discuss the objections that have been raised by southern state finance ministers with the terms of reference for the 15th Finance Commission and explaining it to us very articulately. On that note, let's go across now to Mark Zuckerberg deposing before US lawmakers for the second day after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, live across to Washington.